All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the live stream. And it is worse than we thought. Yes, the European Union have gone ahead and done it. It is really baffling, actually. We've got a lot of stories to go through today, but we will begin with the biggest story, which is most baffling, although that's probably not the right word because quite obvious, I would say. And if you remember on Thursday's Walk and Talk, I explained how angry the European Union were because Viktor Orban of Hungary, the current rotating EU president, went on a peace mission. So he met Putin, he met Xi, and he wanted to create peace in the Ukraine region. And he met Donald Trump. Yes, they don't really talk about that one very much, do they? But he went on this big mission. And the issue is that the European Union were very angry that he didn't have their authority to try and create this peace agreement. I can't say that without laughing. Yeah, that he needed to have their authority in order to create peace in the region. But anyway, we talked about that and we said that the EU are not happy and there's going to be some sort of ramifications about that. Well, let's go straight to the studio share and we'll spend most of today's video on the share because there's a lot to go through as to what they have just done in retaliation for his peace mission. Oh, gosh, here we go. Hungary has been stripped of the EU meeting over they say over the Ukraine stance, but it's actually, if you read the dialogue, it's over what I've just said about him trying to create peace. They're saying, who does he think he is? Does he think he's some sort of hero going out there trying to create peace? That's not his job as the EU president. Again, rotating. So let's get into the story. The European Union's foreign policy chief, Joseph Borrell, has stripped Hungary of the right to host the next meeting of foreign and defense ministers over its stance on the war in Ukraine. It comes weeks after Hungary assumed the rotating presidency of the Council of the European Union, a role in which it would normally host the event, and amid anger over a meeting Prime Minister Viktor Orban held with Russian President Putin in Moscow earlier this month. Mr. Borrell said Hungary's actions should have consequences and that we have to send a signal, even if it's a symbolic signal. Hungary has described the moves as childish. The next set of meetings will take place on 28th to 30th of August and were to be held in Budapest, but on Monday it's been announced they would instead take place in Brussels. Mr. Orban's meeting with Putin came as part of what he described as a peace mission launched days after Hungary assumed the council presidency. And again, there's a little bit of context with this. So why did he do this peace mission? Again, there's always two sides to every story. What Orban has said is that he couldn't see any progress towards peace, and he said that they were just being warmongers in the EU Council and Parliament. He said there was no talks of peace. If you even mentioned peace, you were sort of shot down. I'm paraphrasing what he said in his interviews here. So that's what he says. On the other side, they're saying that the EU is a council, it's a parliament, but they have to make decisions together, and that he's just this hotshot trying to go off there now he's got the presidency and create peace in the region. He doesn't have the authority to do it. So I know which side I sit on in this argument anyway. He also visited Ukraine, he visited China, and he met Trump in the US. This trip sparked condemnation from leaders across the EU, with the EU chief Ursula, our least favorite, describing it as nothing but an appeasement mission. Okay, so that's that aspect. Now we're going to move over to what has just been said in the UK then. And the new Chief Admiral Sir Tony, he has said that the British Army is not as strong as it could be. He said there's serious manpower and equipment deficiencies. And this is ahead of the government defence review. What a weird picture, actually, to show the most powerful military commander in the UK. Probably not the best picture there. The review will attempt to incorporate lessons from the war in Ukraine and make the military ready to take on a Russia assumed to be working closely with China, Iran, and North Korea. Hold on. We need to just repeat that again. The review will attempt to incorporate lessons from the war in Ukraine and make the military ready to take on Russia. It's in black and white right there, as well as China, Iran, and North Korea. Okay, so I think they're telling us exactly what to prepare for. The humility to recognize that we are not as strong as we could be, and the determination and focus to put it right, one of the statements he said. And beneath the headline capabilities, there are deficiencies in people, yes, equipment, stockpiles, training, and technology. The war in Ukraine has forced NATO countries to refocus on planning for a possible confrontation with Russia. You see, this is what the media is writing, a possible confrontation, but what he said is there's going to be one. Despite his criticisms of Britain's state of readiness, Sir Tony was bullish about NATO's relative strength compared to Putin's forces. And again, he does this big spiel about how Russia is getting wiped out in Ukraine, they've lost all their men, etc. But I want to get to wait until the final point from the analysts, and you'll see it's a bit embarrassing after what he said. He said the British Army needed to be properly equipped with hypersonic missiles and battalions of attack drones. Again, we talked about this back in, I think it was 2020, maybe into 2021, where we sort of discussed what I think is the future of warfare, and how I just see Ukraine as this big proxy battlefield going on. And there, even all the defense companies are using it to make promotional material. They're sending all of their prototypes to be tested on the battlefield. So I think it's pretty obvious what is going on here. But I do see this next sort of warfare as not just humans and people, men and women, as we talked about with a lot of the conscription stuff that we've dissected. It does say men and women for certain countries. I think we're going to see a lot of drone-based warfare, and we're already getting the dogs with all the guns. They're being tested right now. The Atlas are still being tested, but I still think they're a way off yet. It would be too expensive to put them in. But we do see what's going forward, and it's going to be these huge swarms of drones, who, by the way, China is still light years ahead of everyone else with the drone swarms. If you've ever seen any of their displays, it's quite fascinating. NATO is growing stronger while Russia gets weaker, Sir Tony said. The alliance was growing stronger while Russia was getting weaker, pointing out NATO had 3.2 million people in uniform against Russia's 1.2 million. Well, here's the thing. It's not really about simply manpower. And again, I'm not comparing myself to him. He's the head of the military. He's obviously an expert in strategy, and he's an absolute genius with it. So I don't want to, in any way even talk against that. But all I want to say is that sometimes it's not about the manpower. 3.2 million versus 1.2 million, whatever he just said there. What did he say? Yeah, 3.2 versus 1.2. It's about as well the technology. If you think about, and if you remember your history, it's usually the power with the most advanced technology. It's not the most men, the most manpower. It's usually the most advanced technology that end up wiping out others. Of course, there's disease and epidemics and things like that. That's what happened with the Spaniards and the Incas, etc. So putting that to the side, it is usually more advanced weaponry. So it's not really just about manpower here. Now, this is where the analysts got involved. Despite Sir Tony's comments, analysts believe Russia is managing to replenish its manpower numbers despite its high attrition rates in Ukraine, finding roughly 25,000 new recruits per month and maintaining a force on the Ukrainian front of approximately 470,000. Well, yeah, the other thing you've got to bear in mind is that every day around the world, just think how many people, how many men turn 18. It's a lot of people, and it will be the same in Russia, it will be the same in other countries around the world, China, etc. Every day you get more people that get older. Every day more babies are born, etc. So it's not as if you can sort of just neglect that aspect and say, oh, well, so-and-so's lost all these men. That's it, game over. Well, no, there's more people aging every year. This has already been going on a couple of years now. That means someone who was 16 then is now 18. So you see where I'm going with this. The next thing I wanted to come on to was Lockheed Martin is now preparing to build hypersonic missiles in the UK rather than in the US. Exactly why they're not being clear, but they said they want to actually build these in the UK. They don't want to build them in the United States. The company pointed to the Mako, a prototype maneuverable missile named after the fastest shark in the seas, as an example of the versatile weapon it is willing to pioneer with the UK. It can do speeds of Mach 5 and can be fired from F-35 stealth jet, as well as used by the Royal Navy for anti-air defense strikes and other air-to-ground strikes. So this is another thing happening at the moment. And this is coming as the new Labour government is carrying out a major defence review that will recommend the capabilities Britain should aim for and those it should axe. Another thing that just came out this morning was an agreement between Russia and Iran. It's set to sign a historic partnership. So I think this is where this sort of article about Russia and taking on Russia, Iran and China. So this came out earlier this morning. Russia and Iran have put the finishing touches on a comprehensive cooperation treaty, setting the stage for the signing of this historic document. During quite productive consultations between experts from legal and regional departments for the foreign ministries of the two countries, the text was finalized. According to results, it was agreed to launch internal procedures necessary. So this is what they're going to start with. It's not yet complete. They're still doing the internal procedures. But they're saying editing such a serious document meant to elevate the status of Russian-Iranian ties to the level of comprehensive strategic partnership has taken almost 2.5 years, and today it can be considered complete. So this was actually been going on for a long time. This isn't anything new. Earlier, IRNA said the Iranian president, in a phone conversation with Putin, said Tehran was ready to sign the cooperation agreement with Moscow at the BRICS summit in October. So that's another thing. The next BRICS summit is coming up in October, and we've already starting to see potential names of countries that want to join. There's over 40 countries that want to join. They're not going to allow all those in. There's just no possible way. But you imagine with that sort of power, that would be 25% of the world's countries, 195 countries in the world. That would be pretty powerful if all of that took place. And now I think we can understand on yesterday's video why Blinken was talking about Iran nuclear weapon in 1 to 2 weeks. It's probably been a week by now because that interview was a few days ago. So you can see where all this is going. You can see that it's sort of NATO here. You've got Russia, China, Iran, North Korea over here. And then the BRICS is more of a economical partnership as opposed to a military partnership. But that's what the SCO is. If you're not aware, that's the Shanghai Cooperation Agreement. That is a military partnership, which is still quite small, but we will see that grow. So we've got a lot of movement. There's an awful lot of movement going on. And then I saw this today as well. The new DoD strategy calls for enhancements, engagement, exercises in the Arctic. What on earth are they focusing? What is in the Arctic? That's the first thing I've got. There's a lot of interesting theories over what's in the Arctic. But why are all these countries fighting over the Arctic? If you read the article, it actually says it's due to climate. They said that because the everything's melting and they've got to defend, they've got to protect the area, they've got to put technology in to try and reduce the freeze. And it's like, am I 5 years old? Am I going to believe all this nonsense? I really want to know what they are doing in the Arctic, why all these countries are so focused and they're fighting over the Arctic. Because if you look at the map, there's nothing there. But I actually think there is something there. They're just not telling us that. Now, this has just come out of China as well. There's all these documentaries, a series of documentaries. You may call it, if you're American, propaganda. If you're in China, I mean, each person will say something different. But they're doing a lot of documentaries on American cities. I mean, from what I've seen, it looks fairly accurate. Sorry, I don't want to be disrespectful, but it seems fairly accurate. And they're talking about, it's been translated, everywhere is garbage. People don't live in these places. There are wanderers everywhere. So let's just open this up see if we can get this opened here.
霍乱城市奥克兰，在这里送你一套房子，你敢不敢住？我们在美国加州的奥克兰市继续探寻，到处都是垃圾，人们没有住的地方，随处都是流浪者，到底是不是真的？今天就去看一看。
Which I've been to. It's not too far off. So there's all these documentaries coming out at the moment about the US. So they're obviously, for whatever reason they're doing this, drop a comment below if you know why they're actually doing this. But there's a lot of these documentaries going on in the US. I thought this one was quite funny. By the way, where is Biden? Has anyone seen Biden? Look at the damage Putin has done. Mr. President, that's Los Angeles. I have not seen Biden in a long time. And I'm very curious to know where you think he is. Now, we just had this poll out as well. And it was 80% of voters say the US is spiraling out of control. And it isn't just on one side. This is both Republican and Democrats. 86% of those surveyed said okay, here it is, acts of violence were throwing this country into chaos. So it was 64% of Democrats polled were very concerned, as were 53% of Republicans. So actually Democrats were more concerned than Republicans. I would have thought it would be the other way around. The share of voters who cited fears that extremists will commit acts of violence after the election rose by 10 points from 74% to 84%. The percentage of those surveyed who said violence as a means to a political goal was acceptable fell from 12% in June 2023 to just 5% now. So at least we've seen some movement on one aspect. Nearly a quarter of respondents in the 2023 survey agreed that patriots may have to resort to violence in order to save our country. So you can see the sort of mindset that's going on at the moment. 66% of registered Republicans surveyed said Trump was favored by divine providence or God's will, while only 11% of Democrats agreed. So it's quite an interesting survey with some of the questions they asked here. Really was. But what do you think? Do you think are you in that 80%? Do you think that America is destabilizing? Because I actually do think they are destabilizing. And I think it's just getting worse and worse as time goes by. And I've been to a lot of the American big cities, and I was quite surprised. And I've talked about this a lot over recent years, but it was a lot worse than I've seen. I definitely wouldn't want to live in some of the big cities. It's not what I would like to, not where I'd like to call home anyway. Much prefer the rural landscape. I've lived in big cities and much prefer the rural landscape now. I think it's going to be a lot better for what the future holds. But please leave me a comment. Let me know your thoughts on what we talked about today. And apart from that, I'll see you tomorrow. Take care. God bless.